our next speakers, I have a power couple, Janice and Jason, joining us from DC today. So thank you guys so much for making time for UXPA and helping, our community learn. Their topic of discussion is faster or farther, faster, and far less drama. So yeah, I'll let you guys take it away.
Hello, everybody.
Hey there.
Hi. I'm going to go ahead and share screen. I'm Janice. That's Jason.
Jason, hello.
And we, see, I'm going to share screen. Let's see how this goes. We wrote a book this year. And so what we're going to do is share a little bit about what the book is. Let's see if that works. All right. Is it coming through? There we go. All right, so I'm going to kick us off, and then I'm going to hand off to Jason in just a minute. And so to kind of put this in the frame of a hero's journey, like my hero's journey, I'm a little girl, that adorable child there in the green coat. And my hero's journey started there. I was the youngest of 4 children. My siblings were all just outrageously, brilliantly smart. Unfortunately, they were also mentally ill. And so I was the youngest of 4 kids. Everybody was like 4, 5, 6 years older than me. So I would sit at the dinner table while they would bicker at each other. And of course, I couldn't get a word in edgewise. And it was, it was a very complicated upbringing. And part of the reason that I'm really open about this part of my life is because I want everyone, if you come from a complicated background, I see you, I feel you, and here we are still doing cool stuff in the world. But, one of the crystallizing characteristics of that context is that I was sort of traumatized by bickering very, very early in life. And after I graduated from college, way back in the dark ages in 1990, I left Ohio, which is where I was raised. Jason comes from Minnesota, in search of a quote unquote normal life. And so as a user experience person, you'll recognize this instinct toward watching, observing, finding patterns, sense making. And I basically took a, user-centered design approach to figuring out how to be a normal human adult. And I, fast forward, I did actually kind of a great job. I had a really good career. I used to be a magazine editor way, way back in the day. I got married in my 20s and then also divorced in my 20s. And then I met him before I turned 30. The internet happened. So I got a job at one of the very first at Netscape, the big, huge, very first internet company. And I started a career as an entrepreneur. And so through all of this time, it's like I had mastered this, this pattern matching, pattern recognition kind of skill. And I found myself as the co-founder of, I found myself here as the co-founder of this company. Some of you may have heard of it. It was called Adaptive Path. There were 7 founders. And we argued for 10 minutes every Tuesday at our partner meeting for 6 months about whether or not to buy a $300 printer. It was so incredibly frustrating for someone like me, allergic to bickering, to have to sit through that partner meeting every week. And, in a hero's journey, you think about the crystallizing moment. And this was my crystallizing moment for sure. Because that's 28 person hours. And when you add up how much it cost thousands of dollars. I think at one point I did the math and it was $7,500 for a $300 printer, just in the amount of time that we spent talking and thinking about it. And with Jason, we began to hunt for a better way to do things, to make decisions, to lead our organizations. And we really focused on who were the leaders who were getting more done. How can we reduce the amount of unproductive disagreement so that we had more time for the productive disagreement? And how can we avoid the drama so that we have more social capital to spend on the things that really matter? In 2010, Jason and I started a company together. It was called Luxor, and Luxor stood for the Lean User Experience Residency. So Before Jeff Gotthelf wrote his book, Lean User Experience, we were doing this Lean User Experience residency. And our mission there was to help early stage companies that had reached their first venture funding round to develop their products. And we had 50 companies go through that program. And the companies included like Lyft and Udemy was one of them, and a whole bunch of other folks that I'm sure you've heard of. And our goal with them was to have the teams come to us and for us to sort of coach them 1 day a week for 10 weeks in developing their products. Now, this was at the very beginning of the sort of boom in startup accelerators. So this is right before that really took off. And so we had this microcosm, this like test bench to observe which teams were moving fast and which teams were really stuck, and what differentiated the first from the second kind of teams. And from there, we were able to draw some conclusions about what was working reliably well to move people forward. So we took all those ideas, we landed that company at a software firm called Pivotal, and we got to Pivotal in 2014. They were about 4, maybe 5 offices, all in North America when we got there. And so I left 2 years later. Jason's basically still there. And when I left 2 years later, there were 22 offices. So this was an opportunity to test some of those ideas at scale. So we brought quite a lot of the kind of product leadership, user experience leadership thinking through all of those ideas that we had tested at Luxor, and then scaled that around the world. So now I decide at that point to leave software behind, right? And see how do these ideas play out in other contexts. Like, so I went to this company, Bionic, and in other contexts, what I'm talking about is like, a space plane on one hand, and we'll tell you about a space plane in a few minutes. I also work, have done a bunch of work with the Air Force, so has Jason, or a bottle of shampoo, right? Like, so I've done a lot of work with Procter & Gamble. So we had these ideas that we developed at Luxor, then we scalability tested it, and then we applied it in other contexts just to see if they would work. And now, we've done all sorts of different contexts for this stuff. And one of the things that we're just honored to do is that every 6 months we'd go to the White House under Obama and Biden, I want to be specific. And we teach this stuff to their professional development leadership program. So like it's absolutely the honor of a lifetime. And what has been interesting in all of that time since we started Luxor in 2010 is to see how all of this weathers the externalities that keep buffeting our leadership, right? So as we support leaders in all of these different contexts, how do you deal with it when you're forced from your home because of wildfires? How do you deal with, all of the different kinds of disruption that we're seeing? And the disruptions are like, they're like end boss level challenges, and they seem to come more frequently, and it doesn't seem like it's going to let up anytime soon. So, summarize that whole sort of like hero's journey experience over 20 plus years. It's like we searched hundreds of leaders, decades of development, hundreds of teams, and what we were looking for as leaders, what works, what's repeatable, is it reliable, and is it easy to do? Is it easy for all of us, regular people, to become more effective leaders, to reduce drama every day, forever? So, as preparing for this book tour, this is the year of ChatGPT. So of course I was like, I wanted to test my ideas versus, ChatGPT's idea about leadership. So I asked ChatGPT, like, tell me again, who were the greatest leaders for the last 50 years? And I kid you not, this is what I got back. A bunch of white dude billionaires. And, no offense to the white dude billionaires, because like, I'm sure that they're great. But honestly, like, I didn't ask for business leaders. I said, what are the greatest leaders? And I believe that these are the people who represent how we have been leading, not necessarily the people who will lead us out of the mess that we're currently in. So I went back to ChatGPT and I said, okay, so if those are the greatest leaders, what does it mean to be a leader? What is it to be a leader? And it said some good things like guiding and steering and a common goal, but it also said taking charge, making decisions, this very sort of top-down command and control version of leadership. And so, you think about ChatGPT, that's the zeitgeist of the past 20 years. So what ChatGPT was describing were those, billionaire white dudes. And honestly, like it's really just not working. Like it's leadership, the state of leadership is not getting better. So how do you do modern leadership becomes this crystallizing question, like what is it to do leadership and what are the verbs of leadership? So when we think about the verbs, and I think that user experience folks and product management folks, more than most of us, understand the value of words like facilitate, collaborate, frame the question, ask other people, as we would say, leverage the brains. All of these things have been practiced really rigorously and with a high level of professionalism and user experience for, in my life, 23 years now. I started Adaptive Path in 2001. And, and the question is, how do we extend that up into the leadership level so that it's not just the user experience professionals that are behaving this way, that it's, something that everyone can practice. So, when I think about that printer decision that was so frustrating to me, where did we go wrong? Well, the first was our starting point. Each of the partners, 7 people to make the decision, had a different starting place. Our goals, that was kind of, we had the wrong goal in mind. We were thinking about output, not outcome. We were thinking about preserving cash rather than supporting our sales effort. Then who was involved? Well, it was the wrong people. We had 7 people involved. It wasn't necessary to have every partner involved. And the decision structure, the way that we framed the question was, do we all agree that we should buy a printer? And that was the wrong question. The decision structure did not need to be a full consensus at that level. So I think that there were a lot of direct parallels between that one galvanizing moment and the 4 leadership motions that Jason and I put into the book that we published this year. And he's going to walk us through 3 of the 4 leadership motions, then I'll bring it home with the durable decisions. Let's see. Whoop. There's the book. She's a pretty girl. We really like it. Farther, Faster, and Far Less Drama is the name of the book. And they're lessons for leaders that really, I think, harken back to some of my origin story in the user experience world. It has been a lot of fun. If your book club decides to read the book, give us a call. We'll drop in for half an hour and answer your questions. And for one hot second, we lived our best life, positioning ourselves like on this Amazon bestseller list right near Blue Ocean Strategy and right next to Clayton Christensen, who are like some of our absolute heroes. So for a hot second, we did that. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jason to walk us through the 4 leadership motions.
Yeah. Hi, cool. So as you can see here, the 4 leadership motions are orient honestly, value outcomes, leverage the brains, and make durable decisions. And you can see there's a little needle on that graphic that we have. We think about this as being like a spinner on a board game. So anytime you're stuck, you can just spin the spinner. It'll land on one of these 4 things. Try this thing. Might help you get unstuck. And I'll talk a little bit about how they can do that. So we'll start with orient honestly. We are taught as leaders, if we're taught anything at all, we're taught how to set goals, how to think about where we're going, how to establish like what's the destination. But we often neglect where we're starting from, right? And that point A that gets us to the point B is really, really important. So we like to think about starting at the point A and orienting there. Think of it like this. If we want to get our team to meet in Albuquerque and we give them driving directions from Denver, that's great if all of our team is in Denver. But if some of our team is in Cincinnati or Miami, those driving directions aren't going to help them, right? We all have the same destination. We have the same goal, but how we're going to get there changes based on where we're starting from. So when we want to figure out a clear articulation of where we're starting from, we go back to our old friend, Barbara Minto. She's not actually our friend, although I wish she was. Barbara Minto wrote an amazing book called the Minto Pyramid Principle. And in it, she articulates this way of structured thinking. And so Barbara Minto was in the first female MBA class at Harvard in 1963. So she graduated in 1963. She was the first female consultant hired at McKinsey. And she actually brought this, I believe this was her study method with her peer group at Harvard. She brought this to McKinsey with her and instructed people on it. And this is still today how McKinsey works with their clients. And so this is very impactful there. And when we're looking at this, we usually just take this first section, the situation and the complication. So Minto says, if you can understand the situation that you're in and what makes that situation difficult, then it can help you find the right question and answer that question appropriately. So I've got a couple examples of what we think of as a good point A, a situation and a complication. So our first one, our company needs to release some software product in 18 months, but the current plan will take 3 years. That's a situation. Our complication here is we don't know how to change our plan, and some people don't even think it's possible to change the plan. The next one, we need to decide whether to enter into a deal with Microsoft. Situation. And our strategy team has presented great arguments both for and against. Complication. How do we deal with that? Finally, we have a fixed amount of money to award in pay increases this year. It's our situation, but it's not enough to give everyone what they really deserve. That's our complication. It's challenging, right? So what I have found is when working with teams to clearly articulate this situation and complication, one, we often identify that there are multiple different complications involved in our situation, and that helps us to better understand what our goal actually should be. Sometimes that goal that we have structured doesn't actually account for all the complications that we uncover. So we might actually have to break it down into multiple goals. And even if that's not the case, every time I've worked with a team to create this articulation, it's given them new insight into the problem that they were trying to solve, and it's helped them to figure out how they were going to get from their point A to their point B. So the second one is value outcomes. There's a lot of talk these days about focusing on outcomes, which is fantastic. Still not a lot of people doing it well. We were at a conference yesterday that was mostly folks in the Department of Defense and other public sector, like federal government teams. And a lot of them still are forced to work from some kind of specification, and they just have to build to the spec, and they're measured on whether they've built to that spec. And outcomes just never come into play. But I'm going to give an example of an outcome and how that can help you. So this is an artist's rendering of a Mach 9 space plane. And Janice has been advising the company that's building this. It's a company called Venus Aerospace. She's advised them for the last couple of years. Last year, they were working on their engine technology, and their CEO set their goal as make fire, right? She could have set that goal as any number of things that would have been outputs. You know, they were moving towards version 3.0 of their engine. She could have said the goal is to make that engine, but the goal was to make fire. And there's a big difference there. The engine they could have made, it might not have worked, right? So she didn't care about the version number of the engine. She didn't care about the reusable test stand that they had to build. She didn't care about the activities that had to go into building it, you know, designing the rocket, testing the rocket, making revisions, all of that stuff. What she cared about was that they made fire, a rocket that actually fired for 10 continuous seconds, I think was the target that they had. And so this is what that actually looks like. They were successful. which is really cool. These are the standing waves, like hypersonic standing waves in the thrust coming out of the engine, which is pretty amazing. And so the important part here is that when you value your plans or you value your outputs more than you value your outcomes, it's very easy to mistake effort for achievement. You can do a whole lot of work and not actually get any closer to your goal. And that's very sad, right? So going back to this idea of being measured for on time, on budget, on spec delivery, right? You might deliver everything in the specification, but if there's no impact, if there's no actual outcome from that, you haven't generated any value, right? And I think that, you know, I've seen, like I said, a lot of government teams over the last several years, and I've seen this in industry too. When you measure things like on spec, you know, as a goal, it allows everyone to absolve themselves from any responsibility for the outcome happening, right? They can say, well, I did my job, right? Like I delivered the thing that they told me to deliver. But what we really want is people focused on delivering value, not delivering things. So actually, we go back to that. When you're stuck, double check and make sure that you actually understand the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And it might help you move forward faster. Third thing is leverage the brains. And I think you all as UX people probably do this better than most other people. This is a thing that's probably baked into your daily life. You've got a bunch of people around you. You're maybe trying to understand what their needs and goals are, right? And you're using their brains to make your product better, right? So we have a pattern. It's a pattern that I'm sure you're all familiar with, but we call it externalize, organize, focus. It's a very simple, ubiquitous pattern. Even people who aren't UX people use this pattern probably at least once a week when they make their grocery list. And this is an example that I really like because it shows how common this pattern is. You know, each week with our family, we scribble things down on a note card in no particular order, just when they come to mind. And then on Saturday, when it's time to go shopping, we'll take what's on that note card and we'll rewrite it into a new note card, and we divide it up by section of the store. This might be a little more than most people do, but we
But
take,
this truly is how we
this
roll.
is how we do it. You know, so the first thing is externalization, right? The reason that people make a list, a grocery list in the first place, is because trying to maintain everything in your head is really hard to work with, right? By the time you get to the store, you end up overlooking things, right? So you get it out of your head into a workable space. Then we take that information and we organize it in some meaningful way. In this case, we're organizing it by section of the store, so that when we're in the produce section, we're only looking at the produce on the list. And when we're in the dairy section, we're only looking at our eggs and kimchi and whatever, right? So that allows us to focus. The way this pattern probably looks for you is something more like this, right? You're working with teams of people. You're helping those people get the information out of their heads into a workable space. You're organizing that information in ways that are meaningful or provide insight to you in some way. And then you're focusing on the parts of that that actually matter. So when you're stuck, you know, spin the spinner. If it lands on leverage the brains, two things to check. Are there brains out there that you could be leveraging that you aren't already? Are there more people that you need to go looking for to get answers from? And two, are you appropriately leveraging the people that you already have? What other work could you do with them to help move you forward? You could even structure a workshop that's just, we're stuck. What should we do? Or we're stuck. Why are we stuck? Let's sit down and brainstorm on that, right? And you can get all of the ideas out of people's heads about why you're stuck. And then what can you do about it, right? So all kinds of ways to leverage the brains. And then the last one, I'll hand back to Janice.
Sure. So
Make durable decisions. This was a hard nut to crack. This was probably the hardest section of the book to write. And so what we found is that there are two ways that decisions really become problematic. So I think that decision making is where a lot of the drama comes in. So we can go faster and go farther if we harness the wisdom of the people around us and we set our goals well. But the drama comes in because we have friction, and the friction comes when we make decisions. And so the first kind of friction are the decisions that just take forever to get made. And, it sounds like, if you hear things like, we've been talking about this forever and no one ever makes a choice, right? Or it also sounds like, do we all agree that this is the right choice? So here you can tell, like, we're coming back to that stupid printer conversation that still, like, is just so aggravating. I should just let it go. And how do we get there? It's because we're trying to make the best decision or the right choice. And in most cases, most of the time, even for very consequential decisions, you're just never going to know if it's right. So you can debate it forever because there's no objective right answer. The second is, do we all agree? Do we have consensus? Both of those things lead to sort of paralysis of the organization to make a choice. The second kind of decision is a little bit less obvious, and this is the knee-jerk, the very fast decision. So as a natural-born entrepreneur, I love making very fast decisions without enough data. Like I'm good at that. But honestly, it's not always the best thing for the organization. And so this one has bitten me personally more often than the slow decisions. The problem comes in because fast decisions are fragile. They can become reversed or ignored or overruled. And what this sounds like is, like, if you've ever been on a Zoom call where a decision had to get made in your organization and someone makes the choice and you can just see on the faces of the people on the call that they do not agree, they're not aligned with this choice, and they're just going to go off and do whatever the heck they want anyway. I do a lot of work at companies like P&G, and when I describe that scenario, I get a lot of head nods. So I don't know if this is you, but that's certainly something that I see quite a lot. The problem with this is that when a decision is ignored, now your teams are working to cross purposes, and it fosters chaos. And even more than that, it erodes the interpersonal trust relationship that, especially in an all remote or a partially remote world, like, that relationship building is so crucial. And so anything that really erodes and degrades that relationship between people is really damaging for the organization. Oop, I'm going the wrong direction. There we go. So when you have gut instincts or knee-jerk decisions, you're going to end up with a very low support kind of environment. And that's how we get these fragile decisions. So the alternative, what we think about, is durable decisions. And I use the word durable like a good pair of Carhartt's pants. So unless you're 22, you probably don't think Carhartt's pants are super cute. They're having a moment now with the young ones. But the thing about a Carhartt's pair of pants is that they're really going to get the job done. Like, they have a double reinforced knee. They've got, really strong rivets. Like, Carhartt's pants get the job done for sure. So what we want is that we want fast decision making, relatively speaking, but also very strong decisions that can withstand the challenges that are going to inevitably come up. So we look for a Goldilocks zone in both of the questions, right? So does it have enough support? Well, the question there is, can you live with it? Can we all live with this? Because honestly, there are situations where, like, really we can't live with it. If the lawyers can't live with it, then it's not the right choice, right? And then the second is there enough due diligence? Like, does it actually move us toward the outcome? Is it clearly helpful? So that's kind of this midway between consensus and knee-jerk, midway between it's the perfect right decision and I don't know, right? So what we want is to balance those things in this Goldilocks zone. So those are the 4 leadership motions. And we have this quote. It's on page 11 in the book. I hope you have a chance to pick up the book. And the quote goes like this: "So we no longer believe in work-life balance. It's all just life. And we need to know that it's a life that we want to live, filled with security, confidence, love, and meaning. And that's what we wish for all of you, that you are building a life filled with security, confidence, love, and meaning. And with that, I am going to say thank you.
Thank you.
There you go.
And we have time for questions.
Yeah.
And would be excited to talk with folks.
That was amazing. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, we already have questions, and y'all know the drill. Pop it in the chat or in the Q&A portion. This was great. It was super engaging, especially getting the other side of product and project management. My first question, and I wanted to thank you for, sharing your journey. I come from a troubled home as well, and so do other people, right?
So many of us do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to say thank you for sharing that. And also a follow-up question, you have a lot of success now. How did you take that turmoil and turn it into gold, right? Because sometimes we grow up with that and we're kind of plagued with that until there's a realization in our lives, that pivoting moment. There was someone that helped us, or we just had enough. Before I get into the technical questions, I wanted to ask, what was that for you? What was that journey like to help others that might be in that situation now?
Well, thank you for asking that question. I'm glad that it resonated. I'm really glad that you asked that question with Jason here too, because it really is it's a partner journey. I was very fortunate to have been introduced to some healing modalities very early. My backstory is it's a cool story that someday I'll write another book about it, right? And by cool, I mean not at all cool. It was a messy really situation. Cool, no. But I was fortunate to be introduced to kind of Alateen and some 12-step programs when I was really young, when I was like 14, 15 years old. So that like kind of planted little seeds that, took decades to really grow. I mean, I have been in therapy for decades. I call myself a complex PTSD survivor. That diagnosis did not really exist until a few years ago. So I'm still in my healing journey. I still work with a trauma recovery team today. And it is, what I want to say to anybody who comes from a complicated background is that it is now more than ever in history possible to actually heal some of these really deep psychological, psychic pains. And I am very grateful that I was somehow gifted with a drive to be healthier. And my whole life, decade over decade, I'm 57. And if you just try to be a little healthier, one day, after the other, a little healthier, it has a cumulative effect. And my life has exceeded my wildest dreams many times over, just because somehow I had that. I just want to stop suffering. And so it is possible to stop suffering. So I'm going to stop. What do you have to add to that? Because we've been together since 1996. So he has seen me through this whole adulthood mess.
It's been a journey. Yeah.
My adulthood has not been a mess.
I think you've covered the points around, your recovery journey and stuff like that. I think maybe the last thing to add is that, one of the reasons that appears in this talk is because we believe that there is no separation between work and life, right? And Janice ended with that quote in the presentation. It's all just life. You are who you are wherever you go. And pretending that you're not, pretending that there's this like separation, that you can be a different person in one place and a different person in another, is just false, right? And as a manager, I lead a team of about 50 product managers and designers right now. And if I were to just pretend that they are not human in some way, like it just doesn't help anybody, right? It doesn't help us move forward and get the work done. So I can't be responsible individually for their mental health, but I can acknowledge that they are human. And I think part of our mission is to normalize humanity at work.
Yeah.
Like we're people.
Well, and the other thing is you can't tell, like nobody ever knew what my backstory was, right? I mean, so you never know what you're what somebody else is walking through life with, right? And so I think it works 360, we're humans.
Yeah. What a great message. Again, thank you for sharing that. You're totally right, because I think one of the ChatGPT misses from that leadership list is what got them to that place and who they are as a human. We have a question in from Jared. He states, with your wide-ranging experience, what do you see as challenges that are particular to a specific industry / government versus challenges that seem to be common to all organizations?
Well, I mean, we just spent 3 days at a conference here in DC that is focused on delivering software products to government. And honestly, a lot of the problems are the same. I've worked with commercial clients over the last 10, 15 years, startups, big companies, tons of work in the Department of Defense, as well as other federal agencies. And the only thing that I see that might be different is when you have a procurement process that's literally dictated by Congress. There are big companies that have challenging procurement processes, but they don't have to get a bill passed. Right? And so there's just a level up there that I think is really challenging. But the stuff that I do see that is common is leadership that doesn't understand the outcomes that the teams are headed for. It's really the things that created the 4 leadership motions in the first place, the problems that those are a response to. People don't understand what their context is right now, their point A, right? So they need to orient and get there. They don't understand the outcomes that they're targeting. They don't know who to include or how to use those people appropriately. And usually what that means is they include way too many people,
right?
And they have free-for-all conversations that go nowhere. And so you end up with a cycle that is months or years long when you could have gotten the same thing done in hours or days. Janice did a workshop with, it was the commanders of the Navy SEALs training camp in Coronado. This was a few years ago. And they sent her a card.
Right, I know.
They sent her a thank you card that said, we got more done in 2.5 hours than we have in the last couple of months. And it's just understanding some basic techniques to help you move forward. It's not that hard, but this is the thing that everybody suffers from.
Yeah. So, I really think that this, how do you get your money, actually has more of an impact on, that's the one thing that seems to change the context in meaningful ways. So there's a big difference between a publicly traded company and a privately held company. And there's a big difference between a small business, like design firm, which, I've run a small business design firm, and a very large organization. Those are the things that cause us to prioritize short-term versus long-term thinking, but otherwise, these are all patterns that are common to humans, right? The 4 leadership motions were designed to be transportable across all contexts, across all kinds of leadership. Like, I found it harder to start the PTA at my son's urban kindergarten back when he was a little kid than to start any of the companies that I've ever started. Like, it just was harder to get a heterogeneous group of volunteers to do something, right? So for the most part, these techniques are transportable to any context.
Thank you. Question from Mara. When you talk about durable decisions, could you expand a little more on what that looks like? You said fast but strong, so I wanted to understand a little better what that means with an example. Thank you.
So first, I want to give a shout out to Mara. Thank you for putting us in touch with everybody here. Mara is Jason's cousin, so that means she's my cousin too. Hi, Mara. So the two things that I look for in durable decision making, the first is, rather than do we all agree, it's can we all live with it? Are we able to disagree and commit to it anyway? So that you could hear that in statements like, look, I don't agree with you, Jason, but I will support you 100%, right? So you can see that builds trust and respect. It demonstrates respect and it builds trust between the people. So in a work group, I don't always have all of the correct knowledge. You may have the correct knowledge. I don't necessarily see it the same way you do, but I could say, hey, I trust you. I trust that you have insight that I do not have. So I'm going to support you as my teammate in making a decision I don't necessarily agree with. The other piece is, will it clearly, obviously move us toward somewhere we need to get to, versus is it categorically best or right? I think that finding a way to discern whether or not something will actually move us in the right direction. I actually think that we don't ask that question often enough in organizational decision making, right? So by asking, is this the right choice, or is this the best way to go? What we do is we create this fiction that if we just talk long enough, we'll discover whether or not it's good. So it creates this interpersonal dynamic, which is really, really different than fact-finding or data gathering, right? So when I think about how to structure a decision, I think about what are the choices and what are the facts, right? And if we can say if we can agree, these are the choices available to us, there are 6 options, right? These 3 options are terrible, right? These 3 options are uncertain, right? So if we can say these are the options available, and here are the facts about the situation, the complication, and the options. If we agree on that picture, now we have a sufficiency of data, right? And we can go into a conversation about which choice do we want to go with. So Mara asked for an example. So what would be an example? For some, I'm terrible at thinking of examples on the fly, so I apologize.
I mean, I was thinking of other things, not examples. What I was thinking of was the conversation we had yesterday with the group of folks at Prodacity, where we talked about increasing trust and reducing risk, right? In order to get people to move forward on something or to make a decision and commit to it. And one of the things that I like to do is try and decrease the scope of the decision, right? So often one of the reasons that decisions get undone, right, they're not durable, they're fragile, is because we're trying to decide on too big of a thing, right? And if you can figure out, like, what is a smaller thing that we can do that's going to still move us forward, right? Can we commit to that decision, right? So it's about right-sizing the decision.
Right.
And so I think I use the example of, if I want my toddler to jump in the pool, right? The first thing I have to do is, my toddler trusts me, right? So I'm going to get in the pool. Okay. So we've got trust, which is awesome, but we also want to decrease the risk. So I'm not just going to be in the pool. I'm going to go over to the edge of the pool, and I'm going to be there when my toddler jumps in, so that, when they go underwater, I can pick them back up. Right. So I've increased trust, I've decreased risk, and I'm not saying jump in the pool and swim 10 laps. I'm just saying jump in the pool and I'll pick you right back up. So we've made it a really small thing that they can do. We've got trust, we've reduced the risk. It makes it a lot easier to commit and move forward.
Well, and Mara says, so this is a little more about compromise. And I would say, absolutely, it's about compromise, but I think I redefine compromise. Instead of compromise being you get half and I get half, compromise is, we're going to give it a try. We're going to try it your way, and we're going to watch to make sure that it's going in a positive direction. And if we get more information later, then we can make an adjustment. So it's about respect and trust.
Yeah, I think there's one more thing to add here, and that's that
We are also at time. I just want to be respectful.
Okay. Most of the time, there's no decision to be made. If you have enough information, the right path presents itself.
Yes.
So leverage the brains of the people around you. Make sure that you have the right information on the table. Don't like waste a bunch of time on it, but get the right information. And then you go, well, path B is obviously the right path, right? That's not a decision. That's just seeing what's true. The only time you have a decision is where you can't see what's true, where you have two things where you're like,
Totally.
I don't know. We don't have enough information. And at that point, you're tossing a coin, right? At that point, you can pick one path or the other. And really what you should be doing there is thinking about what's the smallest thing we can do to move along this path, because this is now risky, because we don't know.
And how will we know after we make this decision whether it has caused some some negative consequence?
Yep.
So
amazing. This is so fun. I wish our time was longer. What a
We
fun
can always come back.
discussion. Yes, yeah, we would love that. Before we let you go, tell us, where can we find your book? How can we reach out to you? What are
Sure.
some ways we can support you and cheer you on from the sidelines?
thank you so much for asking. So the book is available everywhere that you buy books. I read the audiobook myself. So it's available on Kindle, it's available, at Amazon, etc. But it's also available at your local bookstore. You can have them order it for you.
They probably won't have it on the shelves.
That's
something
okay.
like 85,000 books are published a year in the US. But if you ask them to order it, they'll get it for you. And we love supporting local bookstores. So.
And we're both active on LinkedIn. So you can find us on LinkedIn. And I will say that if your organization is running a book club and you guys decide to read the book, we'll drop in for half an hour and do an AMA. So the book is Farther, Faster. Oh, you have a copy. There you go. A copy. Farther, Faster, and Far Less Drama.
There we go.
Cool. Thank you both so much. What a pleasure. And yeah, y'all have been so much fun. And again, thanks for making time all the way from DC and all the really busy schedule. So
awesome. All right.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Have fun.
Everyone, we will meet back at 1:30 for Joe Williams. See you then. Bye.